Hello and welcome to the Stack Magazine's podcast. My name is Stephen Watson and I run Stack, the magazine club that delivers a different independent publication to your door every month. My guests for this episode are Melissa Goldstein and Natalia Rachlin, founders and editors of Mother Tongue, the biannual magazine that's fascinated by motherhood, but in a distinctly grown-up sort of way. We delivered their second issue to our subscribers way back in April 2022. And as we record this, issue 9 is just about to hit shelves around the world. So Melissa, Natalia, thank you very much for making time to talk.
Thanks for having us.
So if the magazine is about to come out, does that make this like a really busy time or a quiet time because actually all the work is done and you've just got your feet up?
I love the vision of putting my feet up.
I mean, it is a bit of like a breath. Like every time after we ship to print, there is like a moment of deep breathing, and we sort of have a day to just sort of let our heads sort of re-emerge into the world. But of course, there's a lot of sort of pre-production in this sort of space as well, where we're lining up for the launch and getting social assets together and sort of putting together, a rollout plan and making sure that all the distribution and retailers and all that sort of side of it is gearing up to receive the mag. So there's a lot of, things happening behind the scenes quietly, but it's definitely less frenzied than those final weeks of production, I'd say. Right, Melissa?
Yeah. There's definitely like a moment. And then we remember all the other stuff that we need to do. So we put. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. All right. So we delivered issue 2 of Mother Tongue in April 2022. So working backwards, does that mean that this is one of those pandemic magazines that emerged out of you suddenly having all this time on your hands?
I mean, it's a partial truth because it is a pandemic project for sure. And the irony is we didn't have a lot of time on our hands because we were suddenly home full time with our kids. So if anything, we had less, right, Nat? But there was a constant sort of ability to reach each other too. There was a constant conversation going on because everyone was at home, So there was a lot of mental space, I think, that we both had for it at that point, but probably less time than ever in a funny way to be doing work.
Which I think was also sort of in a way what gave birth, if you will, to the project, because, I think we were so stretched and frustrated like women across the world, to be in the situation where we not only had our professional work, we then also had our sort of private lives, turned upside down and expand to become teachers and everything else all in one. And I think for Melissa and I, like on a personal level, this project really became an outlet in a lot of ways. Not only did we feel like there was something to explore here that was sort of missing in the market, but on a personal and private, level, it meant that there were these hours during the day where we got to have conversations that went beyond the scope of our homes. And that was really meaningful, I think, and like provided a lot of sanity, frankly, like in those very odd times.
And so when like you two started talking about doing a thing together, was it always going to have motherhood right at the heart of it?
I think it was. It was interesting because we were work acquaintances. We had crossed paths at Nowness in London, which for those who aren't familiar, it's a video platform that was very early to the sort of video content online space. A lot of fashion films and art films and really cool stuff. But yeah, we crossed paths there. And so we knew that we had these common interests in art and design, and that's kind of what we were both doing. But because our lives had suddenly become so motherhood focused, I think it made us realize that the content that was aimed at mothers wasn't really resonating with us. And that made us kind of question why. So I think pretty early on, it was this place of like, well, what would it take for us to be interested in engaging in this space and for something to reach women like us who aren't really kind of drawn in by this motherhood media space?
Yeah, I think it's like the early sort of the early sort of connection around motherhood was this sort of like, let's poke holes in all the things that sort of exist or have existed historically in this space, and sort of ask questions about why they look a certain way, why they speak a certain way, that just doesn't connect to us personally, and surely we can't be the only ones.
Mm.
And I think sort of having those dialogues and realizing that we felt sort of some of the same things gave rise to this idea. Well, maybe there's room to do something different in this space and sort of reclaim this idea of what media for mothers looks like, feels like, how it sounds, how it behaves. And we thought it was high time for something fresh to sort of come to market.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I alluded to it in the introduction about it having this particularly grown up take on motherhood. And I guess a big part of that is there aren't many children in the magazine.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's very intentional. And from the beginning, we kind of were saying it's not about kids and it's not about parenting, which like feels like, well, what is it like? It's I think for some people they're like, well, it's about mothers, so how could it not be? Which was like kind of our point exactly. So yeah, it's very intentional that it's not sort of um, infantilizing motherhood in any way or making it cute or making it sort of sweet in the way that it sometimes is portrayed.
Mm, mm,
I think there was this goal to sort of take it away from motherhood from like sort of just a pure lifestyle perspective, and really talk about motherhood through a cultural lens. Not There's sort of no expectation that you are a mother in order to read mother tongue. We definitely always wanted it to be inclusive across the board. But that's sort of, again, I think we set out to sort of peel back sort of that soft lit, glowy idea that had been presented in mainstream media for so long, and to sort of say, like, look, this is the hardest job there is, and it is a job, and it's so full of richness and complication and nuance, and let's have open conversations about that. Let's explore that through different formats.
mm.
And you say grown up, which is very flattering. um but I think, yeah, I think it was just sort of a willingness to maybe show some of the tension that exists in this role.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I guess probably part of it is that once you take away that softness and you take away the kind of pastel tones, actually what you're left with is this like much more essential and human storytelling. So there's a story in the new issue which is just about to come out, called "Like a Moth to a Flame," which we totally blew me away. Like as a kind of powerful, condensed piece of writing, it's incredible. Like it's great. Maybe one of you could talk about that story.
Yeah, I mean that author, I'm so glad that resonated with you. It's always
Mm.
so interesting to hear like what reaches people. But the writer, her name is Alexa Wilding, and she's a wonderful writer. We've been in touch with her for years and finally kind of made it happen with this issue. Her family has been touched by cancer. She had cancer and her son had cancer. And we started chatting with her about kind of what she might be interested in writing about. And we kind of came down to this idea of like, what's the story that hasn't been told about being a mother with an ill child, you know? And the story for her was like how she coped with it, which was basically by having an affair. And this idea of kind of what we see from the outside and, you know, everyone cheering you on and sort of the messages on the GoFundMe's and whatever it is. And, you know, these kind of messages that she's receiving from the outside world, which are so well intentioned, but you're so strong and you're a superhero and all of that. I think for her was so confusing when she knew what was going on the inside. And she kind of opens up this idea of, you know, the women that she met on that journey and how they were coping. And like, not well is the answer, you know, but also in a very real way, you know, like they weren't these perfect superheroes that were martyrs for their kids, you know. So we always want to hear this kind of unexpected story, which I think, you know, it sounds obvious, but it can be hard sometimes when there's something as dramatic as an ill child to then look past and say, okay, what was going on for the mother at that time, you know? And that's kind of where we
Mm.
always want to be shifting that lens towards what is the woman's story, you know, outside of her connection to motherhood.
And I remember, so I mean, this is going back to issue 2 and the one that we sent out, but the story that still stays with me now is the one of the woman who had decided she wasn't going to have kids, and that was like a life choice that she was making. And then I think her sister passed away, and basically with her mum, she took joint custody of her sister's children, and just I think it was something to do with the intimacy of the way that that was all presented. And it was so almost matter of fact. It was just kind of, this is my life. This is so it's like that thing of kind of motherhood is so many different things and not 2.4 children, like, you know, a couple living together. I think that pursuit of the story is what makes the mag so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That woman's name is Jessica Ripka. And she's a great follow on Instagram because so much has happened with her and her family. And she writes so beautifully about it. That was, when you say matter of fact, it was an as told to story. But she's an incredible writer and storyteller. And yeah, this idea of, you know, I think we're constantly grappling with the way that culture tells women that the path is to be a mother. And we like to question that and interrogate that. You know, as a woman, your path, you know, culture tells us as a woman, your path is get married and have children. And sort of that wasn't the path that she had chosen for herself, per se. It was kind of the path that life presented her. And the way that she has kind of, you know, dealt with it and, you know, the path it's taken on her on is a really fascinating one.
I felt like when I was writing the letter that I sent out with that magazine, I felt like that story really helped because I hadn't really considered it in the run up to it. But of course, there are lots of people who, like, you know, maybe they've decided they don't want to have children and they're just not interested in that. Or maybe they really do want to have children and they are unable to. So I guess I hadn't really considered, so I sat down to write that letter, just how kind of contentious an issue this can be. Is that something that you come up against when you're making the magazine?
I think we're always as aware as possible, like to be sensitive, of course, that there's so many different journeys and wishes and desires and of course like motherhood, fertility, like all of this space is so fragile, right? And I think, you know, one of the things that we strive to do, of course, is to share stories that are from really diverse perspectives, you know, and hopefully one story strikes you, another strikes someone else, you know, and of course we're constantly in a back and forth, sort of trying to create the right balance. And I think, like Melissa mentioned, like we've also done quite a lot of stories about whether children are sort of, do they make sense in the times that we live in, um is this whole sort of like there's sort of a constant examination from as many angles as possible, about this topic in a really wide sense. And like, yes, like, it's definitely something that we take very seriously and that keeps us up at night, as we're piecing every issue together, is like, have we touched on something in sort of not the right or wrong way, but have we done so, with everyone's sort of perspective intact?
We are in conversation with a lot of women who do not have children, who are contributors or who work with the magazine in some way. And we're always very aware of wanting to appeal to someone who doesn't, like if you know, men pick up the magazine and they read it, and intentionally our cover doesn't really, like we talked about with the visuals, like people are used to being hit over the head with like, this is for moms, and so the magazine doesn't do that, and so people pick it up and engage with it, and our goal is to make sure that there's something for them to find and connect with in every issue.
And I guess, like, sort of stepping out from motherhood, like at one remove, you've also got this as a stridently feminist magazine. I mean, like, I love this cover with the artwork by who are we here? So Sophie Dula.
Yeah.
It feels like you're kind of making this. I don't know. Like, it feels like you have your like your own community, like your people who you're serving, basically. How closely do you know those people? Like, how much do you get to kind of see who's reading the magazine?
I mean, I think the beauty sort of post-COVID is that everyone was so hungry to gather and to connect. And I think, we started developing this community before everybody was out and about. And I think we did sort of our first in real life event for issue 4, maybe?
Yeah.
Issue 4, in like the spring of 23, I want to say. We went to New York and we hosted a dinner party, and it was kind of this aha moment, Melissa, like where we looked at each other and we're like, oh wait, this thing does exist out in the world, and there's people who read it. And obviously we knew that theoretically, but experiencing it, and seeing people engage with it and react to it, and gathering incredible women around a table and having people read from the magazine, it was really it was so special to sort of see that there was really a community brewing. And I think that's only really sort of continuously blossomed since then. And we do get, opportunities every year to host events and meet our readers and contributors and bring them together. And that has been one of the most incredible joys of making this publication, is that we sort of continuously pinch ourselves that we get to work with all these incredible women who contribute to the magazine, but also just, we host these events, and you sort of have conversations with people who have found some kind of meaning in this thing that we pour our hearts into, right? So that is really affirming, and something that we only hope to continue to sort of foster. I think, we've really come to recognize that gathering people in the same room, there is sort of nothing more incredible for a small publication, right? And to see people sort of connect the dots and relate to each other. And, it's sort of, we've had like anecdotes from people who have, been wearing one of our caps, and then they've spotted someone else wearing one of the caps, and like they've struck up a conversation. I think there was even, like, Melissa, there was friends on a plane, I think, who were both wearing a mother tongue t-shirt.
Yes.
And they started chatting,
Yeah.
and that is really so unbelievably lovely to us. That it's become sort of like a little key, like, oh, like you're a mother tongue person, like you have all these questions about motherhood, like you're maybe a bit confused, a bit ambivalent, you don't have all the answers. Okay, like we're gonna get along, you know.
Ambivalence is our favorite. Yeah, I think.
And Natalia, you told me this was the Mother Voter artwork that you made.
Yeah.
This was issue 7, and did you say this was also a T-shirt?
Yeah, so our brilliant creative director, Vanessa Saba, who's based out of New York, we were working on a project with the nonprofit I Am a Voter, which is sort of a nonpartisan organization in the US all about getting out the vote. And this was ahead of, I think initially, right, Melissa, it was ahead of the midterms.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, of course, we reissued it last year ahead of the election. Vanessa came up with this incredible design, and we put it on a t-shirt and did a campaign with I Am a Voter, and it became sort of an unexpected success. And there was a lot of t-shirts out in the world, which was really exciting because it was all for a really important cause, and obviously sort of having that political bent is something that has been quite integral to the magazine from the get-go as well.
How has that changed now? Because I mean, we're recording this, and I mean, we all know there's just like the one mad thing after another, like keeps coming out. Is your job any different making this magazine in the current climate?
I don't know that it's different. I think from the beginning, we were starting from a place where people were already quite polarized. And I think that as the magazine has continued and as the years have gone by, we've become more and more convinced that motherhood is inherently political. You know, it's like you sort of can't talk about motherhood in the US without acknowledging all of the politics around it, you know. So I think the job, I wouldn't say it's changed, but I think, you know, when we try to kind of reflect what's happening around us and the conversations that are swept up in motherhood, and, you know, that's a huge part of it that's shaping it, you know, shaping the conversations is this idea that, you know, someone else has authority over your body, or someone else has authority over your child's health, or, you know, I mean, there's just endless ways that kind of, you know, guns in this country and all of the things that are going on in this country, you know, I think it's just, you know, it's swept up in life, and inevitably it's so swept up in motherhood. So I think it's just a continuous kind of effort to have those conversations. And then right now, when media is like, you know, under attack, basically, it's more important than ever for us to continue to kind of, in our small way, push the truth forward and push stories forward.
I think there is sort of, I think there is a renewed urgency, maybe, to sort of keep the flame going, if you will. And you know, I think like we have had people sort of in our orbit say like what you guys are doing has never been more important than it is right now to continue sharing these kinds of stories that challenge sort of so many of the very conventional narratives that are being pushed by the political landscape right now. And like Melissa says, like if we can in our tiny corner of the world, you know, do our small part to sort of keep those conversations going and to keep being a platform for those conversations, you know, that we take that privilege extremely seriously to be able to push out those stories in whatever way we can. And I think, you know, yeah, it is such like a scary moment in the media landscape. And of course, like, we're a small independent publication, but that also gives us enormous freedom, to make choices that mainstream media can't always make. So that's also both quite fun, in the sense that you can make sort of unconventional choices or bold choices. Um, and yeah, I mean, I definitely think that, we feel like we have a desire, certainly, to keep pushing those kinds of conversations to the foreground.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess this also is where you benefit from having built this publishing machine around yourselves. I mean, you can't look at the magazine and miss the fact you've got, you've got a lot of advertising in there. Like like really great quality brands that seem to kind of speak to you and your community. That's something that takes a long time to build, right? I mean, it feels like you're operating from a place of strength with this.
That's so nice
Yeah.
to say. And
Yeah.
we are so incredibly proud of our partnerships. I think, when Natalia was speaking and saying kind of, we can do what we want to do, it's true. And, I was also thinking, like, we've never worried about kind of the reaction we'll get from the brands, because we know that they're so values aligned with what we're doing. It's very self-selecting, the sort of brands that we work with. They're proud to be in there and next to these stories. So that's a real privilege too, to be working with people who are really happy to hold your hand and be sort of proud about it, and loud by virtue of just being in there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on, Natalia.
you go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, so anyone who is involved in making a magazine, a small magazine, is going to be listening to this and going, okay, how do you do that? How do you get these advertisers?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And it's been so hard for us. Yeah. Because Natalia and I, we both come strictly from an editorial background. We never were in sales, either of us. But I think that we kind of figured out that, early on, the best way to sort of sell the magazine was by just getting on a call with people, the two of us, and explaining what the vision was, because no one can kind of articulate the vision better than you can when it's your thing. And you can't sort of fake belief in it, like you can't sort of hire it out especially when it's new, I think, you can't sort of, no one can tell the vision the way that you can, even though I'm not being articulate right now. but
No.
but yeah, I think, like, in terms of the brands, some of them have come to us, which is always incredible and wonderful. And then some we've just felt a kinship with, and really just, DM them or find the contact and get on a call and shoot our shot, really. And that really works a lot of the time.
If we go, like, way back to sort of how the advertising started, so we brought in advertising from issue 2, so the one that you sent out, actually. The first issue was entirely crowdfunded, and for that second issue, we worked with this wonderful woman, Jessica Gray, who came in to sort of help us, just sort of figure out, like, how do we bring partners in, and she was an incredible asset to us the first couple of issues.
Yes.
And she really sort of, showed us the way forward, like, to a point where we felt like, okay, like, I think we've sort of, like, we kind of know how this all works, like, let's give it a go, just sort of doing it independently. And I think, like Melissa said, like, from when we really sort of, made that an integral part of putting the magazine together, like, also because it literally is the first piece to make the magazine actually, come to life, right? There was just this really organic growth of brands, both large and small. And I think that's been something that's been really important to us, is that there needs to be room for, a boutique in Portland, and there needs to be room for the large scale DTC brand that's selling products that we all have in our pantry or bathroom or whatever. And each issue, that's something that we sort of go through is finding this balance, sort of, ideally catering to all the elements of a woman's life. So when you look through our advertising, there's baby formula, there's diapers, but there's also super high-end handbags and lighting and granola, So it's like what might sound quite eclectic, I think in the magazine actually feels quite natural. Those things sitting next to each other as they do in our day-to-day lives. And I think at this point, Melissa, I speak for both of us. Like when I say like we actually quite enjoy that sales process now. Like when we're sort of in the sales season, I think we really have a great time with it now. And also, of course, like some of our partners have been with us now from issue 2. And so it's this like wonderful mix of people we've been working with for several years, and then people sort of discovering the mag and excited to sit next to some of the other brands, because it does kind of become this family, in a funny way. And that's been, very rewarding to see that brands support this kind of project.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you gave credit to Jessica, which is very well deserved, because she did get us up and running. And I didn't mean to say that, I don't want anyone to think that like, oh yeah, we just like charged in there, because she really did give us the confidence to kind of do that, sell it. And she is the one that kind of pushed us to the front, when we were talking to people. So I think in terms of like speaking to anybody who's getting started, I think it is a little daunting. Anyone trying to sell something to someone else, it's like, it feels like a very vulnerable spot. It's easier for someone to sell something that's not their own thing, which is the sort of catch 22 of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think like once we kind of got over that was the real unlock. Yeah.
I love the idea that this is actually like an enjoyable process for you now as well. Like that feels like you've kind of crested the hill and gone over the other side.
I mean, obviously it comes with a certain pressure.
Yeah.
Comes with a certain pressure. Like we're sitting there and obviously like we're working towards a goal and so forth, and looking at page yields and what have you. But it's there is also something like I think, with each issue, of course, you never know, and you definitely do sort of see how people are feeling about the economy and budgets, grow and shrink, and of course we're sort of privy to all of those waves. But I think it's just so interesting to see that there are a lot of people, like a print sale proposition is not like the easiest, right? Like in the world that we live in. And there's not sort of
here is we don't have print budget allocated, but
I mean, who does, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, who does? And it's really been interesting to sort of see these conversations evolve from sort of being like, well, like, what are the KPIs? Like, how do we, it's like we'd rather spend our money on Instagram where we can sort of see the clicks and the what have you. And increasingly, like, I think, like, Melissa, like, I feel like we had that conversation a lot at the beginning. And I feel like increasingly we have less of that conversation where people are sort of seeing the value increasingly. And I think, and I'm thinking this is obviously swept up in like, a much bigger sort of print ecosystem, and it becoming this sort of premium placement again. And, existing on a newsstand for 6 months at a time, not just sort of scrolling through and sort of hitting someone's eyeballs for 2 seconds and then, something new comes along. So I think it's like people are, increasingly maybe coming back around to that kind of engagement with potential customers, which is also like lovely to see. Yeah.
So with the two of you now then, so you've got issue 9 just about to come out.
Yeah.
that means there's a very important anniversary just around the corner with issue 10. Do you have like any ideas on what the future holds for Mother Tongue?
I think we're in a process right now coming up to issue 10, like you say, which is a big deal. And it came a lot faster than we thought.
Yeah.
And it's like Melissa sent me some really cute photos the other day from a few years ago where we both had one of our kids on our laps. And I was like, holy smokes, like they're so tiny. Or it was sort of like this, all of a sudden, this time capsule of like how our kids have grown up alongside the magazine, really. Sort of the fourth baby for me and the third baby for Melissa is Mother Tongue. And you know, I think we're in a place where we want to have some conversations about, you know, does Mother Tongue always exist in this form? Does it evolve at some point? You know, I think one of the things that we we constantly sort of talk about is sort of checking in and justifying our own existence, you know, like as a publication and as like a physical object in the world, right? And sort of continuing to try and be thoughtful about that, about how we put something together, about how we appear in the world. And I think that's really exciting. I think it's really exciting to sort of think about the different ways that something like this can exist. And we don't have the answer yet. There may not be an answer. Maybe it just is what it is. But I do think that we like that thought exercise of, like, you know, sort of, what do the next 10 look like?
See, this is the part of the cycle where we get existential, Steve, to answer your earlier question of, you know, what happens after you send the magazine. We just turn into philosophers is what happens.
All right. Well, look, whichever way this magazine goes, I've really enjoyed it all so far, and I can't wait to see what you end up doing with it next.
You're supporting so much to us, Steve, talking about, you know, thinking back to issue 2. And we've been Stack subscribers for a long time. And it was a real thrill. I remember getting, you know, a copy of Mother Tongue. My husband was disappointed because he already had and felt as though he should be receiving a magazine he didn't have. But I was thrilled and continue to be thrilled every time a Stack shipment arrives at our house. So it's incredibly special what you do and so inspiring.
Well, that is so nice to hear. Thank you very much. And thanks for making time to talk.
Thanks so much for having us, Steve.